Hello, America, and hello, world. This is another episode of Insane Government. Thank you so much for listening. May 10th. It's Tuesday. I don't know. You guys think that's a good thing, but I don't like Mondays. I'll tell you that. Anyway, today's Tuesday, May 10th. Right now it's 8 o'clock. We're here from Monday to Friday, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you so much for tuning into Insane Government. Now, today's episode is called Drugs and the Economy. We are going to have a good guest. His name is Mark Thornton. He's a big, renowned, I think he's renowned anyways, Austrian economist, American economist. And so we're going to be talking about how we are spending billions of dollars on this war on drugs. Countless of people are being put in jail for something that should be treated as a medical condition, in my view, and it shouldn't be a criminal issue. Now, when is this insanity going to end? What is the solution to it? Is it legalization? And because later also we're also going to talk about the economy, where it's heading, and what we should be doing to put America back on track. But here to explain it much better, give us great insight, one who I admire, reading several posts. You can go on Mises.org. It's MISES.org. You can read his post. His name is Mark Thornton. He's going to be coming on. And he is an economist of the Austrian School of Thought, and he's considered to be the few experts on the war on drugs. So we're going to have him on in a couple of minutes here. I'm going to play the intro. Guys, thank you so much for listening. Continue to listen. We're here from Mondays to Fridays, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, also, I want to remind you all, go on my Facebook page, type in Insane Government, simple as that, and like the page. You can get a whole bunch of updates. Also, we are going to get a new look. Everything's going to be switched. Not the name, not how we do stuff, but just the look, graphics and everything like that. My folks down here, the staff, are working on it, and the development is just unbelievable. I already witnessed some of it, and it's like, whoa. And we're making the website a little bit better, and the URL is going to be called insanegovernment.com. So you all have to get ready for this. It's going to be great. And if you go all the way in the bottom of the Insane Government page right now on Blog Talk Radio and click Show Extras, we do have a calendar. So tomorrow we're going to have Jeffrey Murrin on. Thursday, we're going to have Gary Johnson. Yes, the one from the South Carolina debate. For 2000, he'll be on as well. And then on Friday, we'll have Walter Block on the show. May 18th, we will have Pastor Terry Jones on. Then on May 19th, we'll have Barry Goldwater Jr. And then May 20th, we'll have Mike Gerbel. And then May 26th, Curtis Harris. We got a whole bunch of people. We're filling it up even more. And next month is definitely going to have more work on it. So stay tuned. This is Insane Government. This episode's title is Drugs and the Economy. We'll be back right after this intro.
If we want to go to war, and if we should go to war, the Congress should declare it. We don't go to war like we did in Vietnam and Korea, because the wars never end. And I argued the case and made the point that it would be a quagmire if we go in. An embassy in Iraq is bigger than the Vatican. We're building 14 permanent bases. What would we say here if China was doing this in our country or in the Gulf of Mexico?
Thomas, 6 times candidate for president on the Socialist Party ticket, said the American people would never vote for socialism. But he said under the name of liberalism, the American people will adopt every fragment of the socialist program.
Broadcasting live from the Garden State, I'm your talk show host, Victor Mikhailovsky, and this is Insane Government.
And this is Insane Government. I was just reading something right now. But guys, thank you so much for listening. Continue to listen, download the shows, and listen to the shows. So, on the line, we do have the economist here, Mark Thornton. I'm going to let him on the show right now. You guys can put your questions in the chat room if you have any. You can send me an email as well. You can send me a message on my account as well as also. So do it if you want to ask questions as well. So, I'm going to let him on right now. Mark, are you there?
I'm here, Victor. It's great to be with you here tonight and with your audience.
Thank you so much. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing your last name right. Is it Thornton?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, good. Because I'm saying it, I'm like, God, I hope I'm saying it right, you know? Like,
well, everybody says it right, but everybody spells it incorrectly. It's Thornton.
Well, you know, there's the problem, huh? Because I had some people on before, and their names are just unbelievably, like, this one person named Anjem Chowdhury. That was a handful at one point. So I'm like, God. But yeah, I made through that
your last
episode
name is
there.
too.
Oh yeah. Good luck to that one there. Mikhailovsky. There you go. A lot of people are like, Look, I got several awards in my time, and I hate it when they say Victor I'm just Mikhailovsky. I'll get the award right now. And I hate receptions like that when they say my last name. It's so hard to go through that. But we're not going to be talking about today's last names. But what we're going to be talking about is, first off, war on drugs. And I've been researching all of it and been very into it for the past couple of years. And just found some great interest into it. And so my audience has recommended me. And I looked it up and I'm like, wow, he's on Mises.org. I'm like, great. There's that. So I shoot you an email and now you're here. But, as you would know, because you're really into it, the war on drugs is a big, big campaign on this big prohibition on this whole drugs things, from cocaine, heroin, marijuana, all that. It's a whole prohibition on it. And so, it's been started since, they've been making all these departments since the 1914, as much as I know. They had like the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act. They just taxed some stuff in the drugs. That was I think the start of it all. But it's been going on for so many years, and it's been rampant in just few recent years. They've been stepping up on it. But for some reason, I'm looking at statistics and it doesn't seem like anything changed. But before I jump into this as well, let me just to start off, if you can please share with the audience, your background, education, and what current projects you're, if you're doing, if any, and your profession, if you would like to say it.
Sure. My graduate students call me the best economist that nobody's ever heard of. And I work at the Ludwig von Mises Institute, mises.org. I'm a senior research fellow there. I got my undergraduate degree at St. Bonaventure University up in New York, and I got my PhD in economics at Auburn University. I've taught at Auburn University at Montgomery and Trinity University in San Antonio and Columbus State University in Georgia, and I'm back in Auburn working at the Mises Institute, and it's the world's premier free market think tank. An education foundation. We have the largest economic webpage in the world and one of the most trafficked economic web pages in the world. And I'm just very happy to be very lucky to be the senior fellow at the Mises Institute. And actually, we're putting together, we have what's called the Mises Academy, which is online courses in lots of free market stuff. And I'm now putting together a course on the drug war that students can take either auditing or for grades over the internet, and that's going to be offered pretty soon.
Well, that would be interesting because I was looking on that website, and I know they have they look like they have some summer courses there or whatever. And then I was looking at their online courses. I was very interested into it. So I never knew that you were one of the teachers there. So I would love to get that course from there for the war on drugs there if you're going to be offering it.
Yeah, I've been with the Mises Institute for a very long time, and we started out as a very small organization, and now it's, like I said, the world global leading free market think tank, and we're really the most radical of all of the free market think tanks, and it's an educational mission, not a political mission, but we have a renowned course, a week-long course at the Institute called the Mises University, but it takes place in the last week of July, but it's already been sold out for a long time. When I say sold out, it's actually free to the students, but we had so many applications that we had to stop the application process. But we have other conferences at the Institute, and we have other conferences around the world. And we have one in Austria coming up. We have one in Indianapolis, Indiana coming up. We just had one in Chicago and Nashville. So if you go to our webpage and look at the events, there's a lot of great free programs. And the website itself is open, of course, 24/7, 365. There's no fees. There's no registration. Everything's for free. You can download hundreds of books.
Yeah, I saw that too.
or off the website. So it's really a great resource, whether you're, worried about how to get your laundry clean, skateboarding issues, tattoo issues, and then, of course, inflation and taxes and the debt and business cycles. If you want to know about business cycles, our webpage is really the only webpage where you're going to find any reasonable information and accurate predictions about the future.
Oh, yeah. It is a very, very interactive site, I may say that. And I really appreciate it. Guys, they have a donate, the facility there where you can donate. And how you pointed out, they do give out the books there. You guys have to pay for these books, I bet. And so, if you're down there and you're looking at those books, donate. I'm thinking of donating some more money. So I read some of the books there, read parts of it. And listen, some parts I want to read, some parts I want to see it. It's better, not to go to like Barnes & Nobles and wait hours just to get the thing because they don't have the book there, which is unbelievable. But,
yeah, the books that we publish, we make available in PDF format.
Mm-hmm.
You can actually look at the product for free and read it for free. You can download it, you can print it. But what we find is that most people, once they see a book and they can determine whether or not they want the book or not, and then they can purchase it online, and the prices of our books are insanely cheap relative to what you'll find at a bookstore or your
Yeah, I was looking at those prices. Well, I'm thinking of ordering a whole bunch of books, because what I did one time was that I ordered Economics in One Lesson, what was it, Meltdown, End the Fed, Road to Serfdom, Wealth of Nations. I ordered them all at the same time. It was very insane how I got them all into one box, and some crazy Keynesian person opened it up and stole it. Nobody did that at that time. So it was good. I love reading about it. And it's the only economic theory that makes sense. So, and I encourage everybody to go look into it.
Yeah, a lot of these books are, real classics. And we've brought back some early libertarian classics from 100 years ago. And a lot of the books that you mentioned, we're talking about New York Times best-selling books. Mm-hmm. So, and, most of the prices of our books are less than $20. So that you can develop a whole library. As a matter of fact, a lot of people who get into the libertarian free market tank, situation, they like to come to our conferences, even our academic conferences, and buy the books on site and then have them signed by the authors. Mm-hmm. And then you've got something that's really valuable. It's a keepsake, and it's a classic in the libertarian tradition. So, go to the website, look at the events, and say, when and how can I get myself physically in contact with this stuff as well as over the internet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, and that's good. You pointed all out, and yes, I suggest you go into it. And I gotta say, man, you do have a great background. That's why I wanted you for this specific topic, and actually, first before the other people, because I wanted to do this month a big topic on the war on drugs and the economy. I was trying to figure out a good person to start it off, and it turned out to be you, so we're very happy that the audience chose you to do it. So, but I don't know if that's gonna be a good thing or a bad thing. We'll find out.
Well, in your guest tomorrow, Jeff Myron is a great researcher on prohibition. He does a lot of great technical stuff. He's a libertarian, and he teaches at Harvard University. So he's going to be a real unique guest for your audience as well.
Yep. I talked to him on the phone, and he's like, "Wow, talked about it briefly, but he does know his stuff. He made a couple of books, I think, Libertarianism from A to Z, but he's a pretty good person, pretty good author, and everything like that. But now let's jump into this big war on drugs issue. Since we have clarified, a good background, I may add, and the war on drugs, you can see a big resemblance with that in alcohol prohibition, right? Within the crime and the drugs and the gangs, because guys, you have to recognize that alcohol is a drug, and a lot of people don't, especially once they're not educated that well, and they don't recognize alcohol as a drug, and I don't know why, because it's a drug. The crime, drugs, and gangs, that was the thing in the prohibition, right? You know about it, right, Mark?
Yeah, I wrote my dissertation at Auburn University on the economics of prohibition, and what I found was that prohibition of anything causes the same set of problems And, so what I did in my dissertation is I looked at the theory behind what prohibition causes, and then I applied it to both alcohol and to drugs. But it would also apply to baby diapers or orange juice or whatever you want to look at. If you prohibit something, you get the same sort of effects. You get, of course, the legal market dries up, and you get a black market in its place. You get a lot of crime. You get a lot of corruption. The product itself is being produced in an entirely different fashion, and so you get an entirely different result. And so one of the things that economists have failed to realize is that, we think of mainstream economists, they think in terms of prices and quantities. And with prohibition, it's different, because prohibition doesn't just change prices and quantities. It changes everything about the market. Everything is different. And so one of the things I found, and it's probably one of the most important things, is that prohibition causes the product that's prohibited, once it is produced in the black market, it becomes much more potent, and it becomes much more dangerous because it's produced, not by professionals, but by amateurs, essentially. And so even if prohibition is successful in reducing the quantity and driving up the price somewhat, what they've ultimately caused is the product to become much, much more potent and much, much more dangerous. And so, for example, during alcohol prohibition, basically Americans were beer drinkers before prohibition, and then with prohibition, when everything had to be secret and everything had to be condensed and concealed, what the illegal producers ended up bringing to market was high-potency whiskey. So it wouldn't be surprising, for example, that whiskey it was typically maybe 80 proof or 40% alcohol would be 160 proof or 80% alcohol. So it's much more potent. It's produced, they would call it bathtub gin because it was produced in small batches by amateurs. And they would add in all sorts of adulterants, like wood alcohol, which is very harmful to your health. And so, when prohibitionists, they thought, well, we'll dry up the supply of alcohol so that people will be healthier and so that people won't be harmed by alcohol. But what actually happened is the whole thing backfired. Just on this one margin of potency and purity, we ended up producing a product that was much more dangerous, much more harmful, and of course they were not able to completely dry up the supply of alcohol, so that the total amount of alcohol consumed during Prohibition was about the same, but it was much more dangerous product, both for the people producing it and for the people consuming it.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point with the gangs, and you brought up a good point with the crime. But how I look at it as well is that I'm just starting this in economics things. But if you take out, let's say, some of the supply, it's going to drive up the demand, obviously, right? And let's say if we take out the, nowadays for, let's say, the cartels, they're driving like a couple of vans up and down the border, right? Let's say we take one of the vans out. Now they have to hire a couple of more people to guard that van. That costs money, and the drugs of the cost of the drugs will go up as well. Now let's say we start going down in their farms and start spraying pesticide on it. It's going to kill that thing, but really, you really think you're going to kill every single plant? That's just impossible. You're going to have that one plant that's going to cost so much money. And so all the price of it is just going to be, driven up. Everything. And you saw it in like alcohol prohibition. That's what I think led to the rise of the mafia. When we finished the alcohol prohibition, got rid of it, they were falling apart, but then they found this thing called gambling, and they went into that. And then they found this thing called narcotics, and they went into that, and they stayed. Now you have the cartels and stuff like that who are just primarily with the narcotics. Now they're going on to that. So you can agree with that, and you can see some sort of relationship. Am I right in that observation in saying that the prices are going to go up, and this is partly the reason why the mafia and the cartels stayed around?
Yeah, the law enforcement and the the jail sentences and that sort of thing, they impose costs on these producers. And so the producers, the price goes up and they're willing to pay more costs in order to bring that product to market. And so all sorts of new organizational forms. You mentioned the street gang. We have the street gang today, but the street gangs originally formed during the 1920s to distribute alcohol from the wholesale producers to the speakeasies, which were, the secretive bars during the 1920s where, you had to have a password in order to get inside and that kind of stuff. So that was that new organizational form of the street gang, where they got all the money, but they also had that organization. And then the mafia, of course, the mafia and organized crime, what they would do is they would buy off the cops, they would buy off the prosecutors, and they would buy off the politicians with bribes so that they could operate without fear of being apprehended. And so the organized crime or the mafia would pay bribes, and they would turn in their competitors so that the police could say, oh, we're capturing people. Mm-hmm. What they're actually doing is, they're creating a monopoly for the mafia. So it's a real, that's an organizational business form that was adopted in order to get around the greater and greater enforcement. So, it's a never-ending process. The more they try to enforce things, the higher they drive up the price, and the more resources these illegal producers have at their disposal to buy bigger guns and to pay bigger bribes and to, buy off politicians higher up the political scale. And so however hard we push in trying to prohibit things with police officers and investigators, longer prison sentences, no matter what we do, it just gives the other side more money to avoid everything. So you just can't win this game. It's no matter how far we push it, no matter how far we degrade our Constitution to fight this battle, ultimately it's a losing cause.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, I'm looking at some of this and some of the history behind it. We've been doing so many operations. We do so much domestically. We arrest around, what was it, in 2000, it said 1.5 million Americans arrested for drug offenses. 500,000 were even more imprisoned from that. So our jail cells are being packed now, and the room is not being left for the murderers and everything like that. The ones who, I think, need to be there. They're the ones that are threatening the rights of others. But let's say if anybody would be under the influence or whatever while driving, then that's something different. You're bringing somebody else. So, of course, and just doing it, person we should put into there, and that's what we should need to reform. But look at the foreign type policy, foreign policy with more drugs. I remember President Nixon, he had something called Operation Intercept. I think that was the name. And it was basically a large amount of drugs at the border between Mexico and he almost shut down, according to people, the cross-border traffic because they're trying to check this stuff out. But that effort only lasted an astonishing 20 days. I think he realized the level and what he's versing here. And later, you got the Just Cause operation in '89. So this was, I think, dealing with Panama. And George H.W. Bush, he also directed this whole thing. So it's been going on for years. And you got the Colombia thing, the most famous one. We've been trying to get them out. And guess what? We killed Pablo Escobar, right? And we burned and we got rid of most of their cocoa plants. But for some reason, the cocaine still keeps on coming. They still come here with submarines and planes. So we're really not doing something right here. And, when Pablo Escobar died, people thought it was over. And, everyone knew like a week later that it's not, because after all that violence. So since you're saying all this, do you think this is the right thing we're doing? with foreign policy, with the war on drugs? Do you think we should continue what we're doing? I know we're funding a little bit more of it to fight this war on drugs, especially in Mexico and other countries. Do you think we should continue doing this, in your view?
Absolutely not. And, that's another promise of the prohibitionists, is that if we eliminate alcohol, if we eliminate drugs of certain sorts, that will prevent crime. And so you'll get a bonus back by getting rid of the drugs or the alcohol or whatever it happens to be. We'll have fewer crimes, and so society will profit from it. But of course, again, it backfires. It's the exact opposite. As you mentioned, we put people who are convicted of nonviolent drug offenses in prison, and we have minimum mandatories for smoking pot, but there's no, that doesn't apply to rapists, murderers, arsonists, burglars, and things like that. So once we fill up the prison with nonviolent drug offenders, they have to release early murderers, robbers, and rapists. And so these people, the real criminals, know that the cost of crime for them is going down, while the cost of pot smokers is going up. And so we are the most imprisoned people in the world, in all of history. And it hasn't stopped drugs. It hasn't reduced their price. It hasn't decreased their availability. It's only led to a much, much higher crime rate in the United States. During alcohol prohibition, for example, before alcohol prohibition, the murder rate in the United States was about 5 murders for every 100,000 people. During prohibition, it got as high as 10 murders per 100,000 population. And when they repealed prohibition, it fell back down to 5 murders per 100,000 people. We never got back to 10 until the modern war on drugs. And of course, now we have lots of violence, lots of crime, much of which goes unreported. And of course, we've exported crime to places like the Mexican border, which is basically a lawless area now, where the cops are being mowed down by the drug gangs. And so not only do we have a tremendous amount of crime in the United States, which the police can't control, which individual citizens now have to control it for themselves, but we've exported all this crime to other countries. We've exported all this drug corruption to these other countries. And so the promise of the prohibitionists that we'll be healthier, and things like that, or that we'll have less crime, it turns out to be exactly the opposite. We have much, much more crime. We've clogged the court system. We've completely filled an ever-expanding prison system, all at taxpayer expense, of course. And so the taxpayers can't get justice anymore for the normal crimes, property crimes, violent crimes, things of that nature, because the whole criminal justice system is being dragged into this war on drugs, and it's being completely clogged up. And the entire legal process has been mutated because of efforts to enforce these laws. And as a consequence, Americans no longer feel safe. And huge sections of the inner city where a lot of the drug war is fought has been completely decimated. Neighborhoods have been completely decimated. Public school systems have been completely decimated. People no longer feel safe. And as I said, the murder rate is outrageous. As a consequence, and innocent bystanders are being killed in this war on drugs, drive-by shootings, gang violence, and of course the gangs it's all about the drug money. And so basically what you have here is the promise of the prohibitionists with respect to crime, with respect to corruption, with respect to health, and all the rest is just a complete lie, in fact. And,
you brought up a point there about, some of the killings that would happen and stuff like that are happening right now. But, I'm bringing up this topic, in my, we had some topics in my English class. I'm 16 years old, and everybody else is like oh God, right, what's he going to bring up this time? But no, they really admire what I'm saying. But today we were talking about war on drugs, and I said, let's legalize all the drugs. And some of the kids were saying, Victor, if we do that, and end prohibition, some of the kids, and even the teacher was saying, you know, wouldn't the drug user want more drugs and then shoot me, you know, like for it? But I'm like, what's your thing on that? If we would legalize all the drugs and now it's in high quantity, you know, that's what they're worried about, that now all the streets would go into chaos and people are going to be doing drugs in the street and the kids are going to do it and they're going to crash their cars and just basically go insane, and the production would go lower because nobody would be working that efficiency. So they're worrying about the economy, the safety, the health of people. So what would your response would be to that?
Well, it's a complete fallacy. Yeah, it's a complete fallacy, and it's not surprising. You know, I mean, people see, you know, the illegal drug business, and then they think, well, if we legalize that, we'll just get much, much more of the same thing. But what I've shown in my research, dozens of papers and articles and books, is that what would really happen is that the illegal marketplace would disappear and the legal marketplace would reappear, which is exactly what happened with alcohol prohibition. Okay, so if Walmart or Bayer Pharmaceutical Company started making marijuana cigarettes and selling marijuana cigarettes, what you'd find is that the product would be less potent, it would be much safer to consume. You know, Walmart would not be shooting people from Target because they were also selling marijuana cigarettes. And the companies who sold marijuana cigarettes would be competing not only on the basis of price, but on the basis of quality and on the basis of safety. You know, and so there would be the crime, all the crime element in drugs would disappear. The safety element would be greatly enhanced because companies don't want to kill off their customers, whereas heroin dealers don't really give a damn. And so, you know, companies would, produce safer products, just like you see, you know, low tar cigarettes and light beer and decaffeinated coffee. You know, there's safer, less addictive alternatives that are being offered in the marketplace. And so, you know, in the marketplace, when safety improvements are added into an industry, everybody adopts them because they can advertise. In an illegal marketplace, nobody advertises because the cops would bust you. So like Henry Ford, everybody's heard of Henry Ford. Well, he introduced the safety glass windows that if they got hit by a rock or you were in an accident, the glass wouldn't shatter and cut everybody to pieces. And once he started putting those into his automobiles and advertising, hey, we've got safety glass in our automobiles, guess what? Everybody adopted safety glass windshield. And so we would expect the same sorts of things in a legal market for drugs, is that the products would be much safer, that there would be a tendency towards safety and information. For example, in today's marketplace, we've got last year 27,000 people died of an overdose. The majority of them were for legal prescription grade drugs, but things like barbiturates and heroin, things of that nature, yes, they're not good for you, but what kills you is taking too much heroin while simultaneously drinking too much alcohol. But that's something that nobody tells anybody, whereas if it was a legal marketplace, everybody would be compelled to tell all their customers, hey, if you take this drug, make sure you don't drink any alcohol, or it's going to slow your heart down and cause an overdose. Even I didn't know that for years.
Well, I never knew it.
As somebody who was doing research on illegal drugs. So, I mean, problems like that would virtually disappear overnight. And speaking of, disappearing, when we did repeal alcohol prohibition, it was FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who repealed it. And he got the nomination for president because he switched his position from prohibitionist to a repeal candidate. He made it his number one campaign promise. He made it his number one priority in office. And so as soon as he goes into office, he legalizes beer. He tells Congress, get together a constitutional amendment, the 21st Amendment, to repeal prohibition. And the country was overwhelmed in a period of days, basically. Everybody was rejoicing in the streets. Crime came, screeching down. Corruption was greatly diminished. All of a sudden, wineries reopened, breweries reopened, distilleries reopened, new jobs were available. The unemployment rate on election day was 25%. And all of a sudden, new jobs were available all across the country. Farmers had new markets for their products. Barrel makers, bottle makers were back in business. Bars and taverns opened up all across the country. FDR's theme song, "Happy Days Are Here Again," rang out throughout the economy. It was a magical transformation that legalization brought about, and it didn't lead to more people dying or anything like that. It didn't lead to more alcoholism. It actually reduced a lot of these problems, and so legalization, you can't think of it in terms of just lowering the price of a black market illicit good. You have to look at it as eliminating an entire black market economy and all the crime and corruption and degradation that goes on, and just normalize it. So it's just a normal product like a prescription drug or cigarettes or alcohol or aspirin or anything like that. I mean, there's no ill effects, or very few ill effects associated with those products. So that's what legalization holds a promise to. And incidentally, when they legalized alcohol in 1933, of course, the government was running short of money. Public school systems were failing. Firemen and police officers had to be laid off because there was no taxes coming in. And when they legalized alcohol, they reinstituted federal taxes on alcohol, state taxes on alcohol, and local licensing fees for bars and taverns, local taxes on alcohol, so that government started to get more revenue, and were able to hire back school teachers, firemen and police officers, things of that nature. There was actually a big-time tax revolt going on across the country because people were losing their houses, they were losing their farms because they couldn't pay their taxes. And so the FDR, with legalization, he ended the tax revolts. He got city, county, state, federal budgets back in line, even though, of course, the price of alcohol for the consumer was falling dramatically. In other words, instead of paying $1 for a beer, you were paying 10 cents for a beer, and 2 cents of that was going to taxes. So the government was making more money, and consumers were getting a 90% tax cut on their alcohol purchases. And so it was a win-win-win-win-win proposition for the American people, and that's why FDR is one of our most popular presidents. A lot of people think, especially the big government liberal types, think that FDR was popular because of his New Deal, and because of World War II, and because he got us out of the Great Depression. Well, the simple fact of the matter is that the New Deal had very little impact on the daily lives of Americans. And, of course, he never really got us out of the Great Depression. We had 15% unemployment throughout the 1930s, which is almost twice as bad as it is right now. So things were bad, but the fact that he came into office and made things so much better by legalizing alcohol made him the most popular president, or one of the most popular presidents in U.S. history.
Now, here's another thing that's going through. It's dealing with, before we hop onto the solutions a little bit and a little bit about the economy, but here's another thing. It's like the rights dealing with it. Like, I personally think if we would just talk about this whole issue, if you want to do drugs in your house, go ahead. If you want to do it in your backyard, go ahead. If you want to shoot yourself up until you die, go ahead. But just don't go in the car and drive by my house or anything like that, or drive by me while you're intoxicated with that stuff. Don't come by me or trying to inject that stuff with me. It's just your life, and you do it whatever you want. And I think you have a right to do it. And the big thing is like we were discussing before, it's like, okay, if we would legalize, everyone would be crazy. I asked that question again in the English class today. I said, listen, raise your hand. If we would legalize heroin right now, if we would legalize it right now, who would do it? Nobody raised their hand, you know? So, and I'm like, who would do it even if it was illegal right now? Nobody raised their hand. So, I'm like, is the term going to cause somebody to do it? No. It's themselves, you know? I think making it illegal makes them more curious. I don't know. But I don't think the term is not the factor that's pushing these people to do it. And all these people are worried about it. Don't worry about it if you're not going to be the one affected by it. And supposedly, the whole country is against the whole drug, so nobody should be worrying about it right now. As it is, not a lot of people use heroin. Not a lot of people use cocaine. So these most dangerous drugs are going to stay with the most craziest people in society, okay? And if they do it, they do it. If they drive a car, they're going to be charged with that. But, well, what do you think? What do you think about the rights and the individual and the drug use? Mark, what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, first of all, Victor, it's actually the case that prohibition actually draws certain people, a certain class of people, towards it. It actually encourages them to do it. For whatever reason, I'm not a psychologist or an anthropologist, but it's well known that young male adults, say 16 or 15 to 30, young 30s, are drawn to risky behaviors. And so by making something illegal, by making it the underground economy, it tends to attract risk-taking people who tend to be dominated by young adult males. And so it actually increases the demand for those most dangerous drugs. And by legalizing it and making it more normal, people are more likely to ignore those products altogether. And so, and then also you're absolutely right about, the legality of something and its use in society. For example, private prohibitions work very well in contrast to government prohibitions. Private prohibitions are things like airline companies, trucking companies, forbidding the pilots and the drivers consuming alcohol or drugs prior to or during their work schedule. So any kind of heavy machinery, any kind of dangerous job, employers mandate and very often use drug testing so that their employees are not operating these dangerous machines while under the effect of drugs and alcohol, primarily because they have a legal liability. If their employees do something that's harmful to others, whether it's legal or illegal drugs, and other people are hurt, the employers take the liability. And so those type of private prohibitions are very well enforced, and churches can prevent their members from smoking pot during services. Convenience store operators can put out a sign that says, no shoes, no shirt, no service, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, you don't want people walking around barefoot in a convenience store where there very often are broken glass bottles. And so those type of private prohibitions, will segregate drug consumption away from the public. So just as restaurants started offering no smoking sections long before the government came up with any idea about restricting tobacco use, They wanted their customers to be able to be segregated away from tobacco smoke, which some people find offensive. And so the market came up with that idea. It worked extremely well. And, airlines did similar things long before the government ever came in with a prohibition. So private sector has... Go ahead.
Talking about that, and you bring up a good point there. Here in New Jersey, some places ban smoking. The private institution bans smoking in the restaurant. I have no problem with that. But what the government has done is they banned smoking in all restaurants. I don't care what you say. Now, what do you think about that? Do you think that's right that the government says that, like, we're looking out for the people there? Or do you think it's more of a private institution's choice there?
Oh, it's certainly it's the private sector. I mean, the private sector comes up with these ideas. They find out where they're useful and where they're not useful, where they're beneficial and where they're not beneficial. I mean, the government, they'll come up with a bright idea about banning smoking in a cigar club. So they come up with all sorts of crazy things. They take a good idea from the marketplace and then they take it to the ridiculous extremes. For example, they wanted to ban, a long time ago, they wanted to ban smoking in public buildings entirely because of the possibility there would be fire and other people would be hurt. Well, it turns out, upon empirical investigation, what I found is that there were almost no fires in public buildings started by cigarettes. All the fires started by cigarettes were in private residences, which the ordinances that the government were trying to put into place had no effect. And so they didn't even bother to check the facts. They just, went ahead with regulations and rules and laws to impose their will on society, again, having no practical effect, essentially. And basically just making everything much more difficult for people so that now instead of employee having to smoke in their office, they have to go downstairs and go outside in the cold and the rain, losing valuable work time, even though they're smoking in their own personal office would have, or maybe employee lounge would have, no negative effect on productivity. But the government bans it without understanding or even investigating the effects. So it's a matter of taking away liberties and getting no practical benefit from it all, and actually hurting productivity. So it's just, once again, the government do-gooders, the nanny state of these bureaucrats and politicians and do-gooders, progressive, socialists, whatever it happens to be, of grabbing a good thing that's been developed in the market economy and wanting to take it to an extreme, exaggerate it, and force their will upon everybody in society for no practical benefit.
And we were talking about war on drugs before, and we were all bringing up good points here. And I really appreciate you coming on again. I want to say that. And you're really bringing out good knowledge I never knew before. But, we always can criticize. And I came on the show before and I gave out my solutions for this war on drugs and how to bring crime down and everything like that. So I think maybe we touched upon it, but just to make it clear, what would be your solution in short to this big crime rate in drugs and big drug use? What would your solution? Would it be increase police, or maybe not make it that combative? Maybe make it like stand back a little bit? Legalization? What's your solution to all of this?
I would go. I've got a lot of work on Mises.org in academic publications, and I like to call it perfect legalization. And that's where you legalize all of the drugs, and you treat them essentially like you would any other commercial product, with no other regulations, no other taxations other than those that exist on other existing goods in the economy. Create a level playing field. Release all the nonviolent drug offenders from prisons and jails. turn the attention of police towards property and personal crime. And I would also, in order to make this work, in order to really chomp down on drug abuse and irresponsible behavior, is that I would also dismantle a lot of the social safety net so that individuals can't just go about drinking themselves into oblivion and smoking pot until they're, numbed beyond belief, or taking dangerous drugs like cocaine and heroin and methamphetamine, and then, crashing up their car, burning down their house, and then they get to use the taxpayer services of ambulance, hospitals, and unemployment benefits, and welfare, and public housing, and all these other elements of the social safety net. No, we've got to take that social safety net away and make people rely on their networks of friends, of family, of social institutions like their church and the Salvation Army, insurance companies, and things of that nature, so that there is no free social safety net, that you have to be personally responsible to create your own personal safety net of friends, family, church, civic organizations, and so forth, that you have contributed to positively, so that they're willing to help you out if and when you do get into trouble of some sort or another. If that kind of situation existed in society, we would have much less irresponsible behavior. And that's not just drinking, that's not just drugs, it's any kind of irresponsible behavior. And so if you have that kind of onus on each and every individual citizen in society, and you have the police redirecting their attention towards protecting homeowners and children, protecting property, investigating rapes and murders and robberies and burglaries, and of arresting all sorts of people who are doing real harm to others, then society is going to be much more prosperous, much more peaceful, and much more along the ideals of the American Revolution.
Well, put it in a great, great way there. And you put the more solutions in there, although everyone heard that. So
it's perfect legalization.
Yeah, perfect legalization. That's a good term, too. So I'm going to use that in the next class, because I'm writing an essay on it. Big, persuasive essay we're going to be working on all week. And a whole bunch of topics to choose from. So it's war on drugs, So now I'm going to put that in my essay. And I spoke to Mark Thornton, and we talked about perfect legalization. So, so I can't wait to put that one in there. But, we have 7 minutes left, and you said you only could stay up until 9 o'clock here. I got several emails and several even comments at school and everything like that. They've been asking me, Victor, you're getting all these economists on the show. Can you ask them a couple of questions? And one of the questions is basically hyperinflation. And I study Austrian economists a little bit and the economics about it. And what do you think is the possibility of hyperinflation? Do you think it's very possible in the next year or so? That's what some people are saying they're predicting. Like some faculty in my school, the ones who buy all silver and gold, is saying it's very possible in a year or so. Is this fake? Is it possible? Is it possible? What do you think?
It's certainly possible, Victor. We are on the road towards hyperinflation. We are doing the things that are the preconditions for hyperinflation, which is essentially building up a huge government deficit. And also, the Federal Reserve is basically going along with this deficit spending and this burgeoning national debt. And it's creating more and more money. It's buying up more and more government bonds. And that essentially is the formula for a hyperinflation to break out. We are the world's reserve currency as of right now. If we are dropped as the world's reserve currency, and we're in the process of being dropped as the world's reserve currency, then inflation is going to pick up at a much higher price, at a much higher rate, something that you and your friends have never, ever even seen or conceived of. and it's going to be an entirely different world, and all sorts of things are, with prices rising and the value of the dollar falling, the price of gasoline rising, the price of all commodity-based products rising very rapidly, going beyond our ability to consume them. Hyperinflation is when prices are rising by more than double-digit figures every month. But basically, it gets completely out of hand. I mean, in Zimbabwe, which is the most recent hyperinflation, they were issuing trillion-dollar bills, okay, so that the average guy had tons of trillion-dollar bills in their wallet. And a $1 trillion Zimbabwe note would buy you a cup of coffee, and then eventually it was worth nothing. They had to put signs in public restrooms that said, "Please don't use Zimbabwe dollars as toilet paper." They were clogging the pipes. Okay, and the entire economy breaks down, and the social fabric of society breaks down when you have a hyperinflation. And there's a history of these hyperinflations that have occurred around the world and even in the United States. During the American Revolution, we had a hyperinflation. There was a hyperinflation in the Confederacy during the Civil War, and it's all related to big government debt. And so there's no signs in Washington, D.C. that they have any intention of dealing with deficits or the national debt or the entitlement programs like Social Security or the future unfunded liability of the federal government. And basically, we've seen estimates by professional academic economists and even by government economists that have estimated that our future unfunded liability, which is basically all of our expenditures into the future that we don't have revenues to cover, it's $200 trillion. That's the highest estimate. But, with that as a precondition, and as Washington showing no signs, I mean, that recent budget cut amounted to something along the lines of $300 million. Okay, that's not even a drop in the bucket. Not even a drop in the bucket. That's not even the humidity in the bucket. And
that's
so
embarrassing.
It's truly embarrassing. And so hyperinflation is currently a projection. In other words, that's what we're headed towards. And unless we make some changes, adopt the Austrian School of Economics point of view that government's budget should be balanced, that government should be a small part of the economy, that taxes should be small or non-existent, replaced with fees. We make Governor Christie look like a wimp, basically. But all the things he's doing in terms of trying to rationalize expenditures, and cut budgets and balance the budget, we would like to do on steroids for the federal government. But they're not even turning their head and looking over their shoulder. They're pushing full steam ahead with ever increasing budgets and no tax cuts under consideration, no budget cuts under consideration. Another thing that FDR did when he first went into office, he cut all federal employee pay by 25%. That's another reason he was so popular, because everybody knew that government employees were making twice or more than what private sector employees were making. And that's even worse here in the United States today. Government employees for similar jobs and experience make twice the wages and benefits, including days off from work, that a similar private sector worker is getting. So, but we're not doing any of that. And none of the candidates are even suggesting any of that. So hyperinflation is something that your listeners need to acquaint themselves with and need to be prepared to deal with financially, emotionally, and psychologically, because it's like an earthquake going through society, but it's not vibrating the surface of the earth. It's shaking the very foundations of the market economy that they have come to basically to live on. And as a consequence, we can stop it, we can change it, we can reverse it, but we've got to get to it, working on it very soon.
Yeah. And before I let you go here, for my own little conscience and my other friends, I don't know how well you can give advice on this, but I just bought 10 ounces of silver when it was $31 per ounce. I didn't get it on spot, but I got it for $32 an ounce. And I'm trying to stock up on silver, then sell it, and then buy a whole bunch more again and save it, just in case if hyperinflation is going to happen. Do you think keeping silver at home and saving it all up for hyperinflation is going to be some sort of deterrent, a little hedge against the hyperinflation, or is it just minuscule and not going to do anything?
Owning silver, and yeah, you can own it in your house. As a public advocate of gold and silver ownership, I have to keep mine in the bank. But it's an insurance policy. It's not an investment. It's an insurance policy. It's just like owning a fire extinguisher. You have it in your house. It's off in the corner. Nobody really pays any attention to it. You don't ever want to use it, but if there's a problem, it's there. So that's the way you want to view owning gold and silver as an insurance policy against things like inflation and hyperinflation, or even war, or other types of disasters that other Asian people and African people hold gold against all sorts of catastrophes, but certainly inflation and hyperinflation are the two most important.
Mm-hmm. I'm just wondering, I don't know if I was stupid to buy all that, but everyone was saying, it's like, Victor, you bought how much? And I'm like, I just wanted to get it, I have it stocked up right now. I just took out a couple of coins here, silver dollars here. I love them, they're nice, pretty coins. But
I went to a Subway on St. Patrick's Day and ordered a turkey sub and gave them the money, and I got back the change, and in the change was a quarter. It was a silver quarter. And I went back to my office and I looked it up on the internet, and that quarter was worth more than my entire lunch cost. Now, fast forward a couple weeks later, it was worth over $10, and it's still basically worth the price of a Subway sandwich and a Coke. That gives you some idea about how much inflation we've experienced since 1964. And of course, the massive movement in silver recently, is hopefully not a sign of the future, but it certainly looks that way. And then, of course, we saw the collapse in the price of silver due largely to the fact that the brokers in silver were requiring larger margins on speculators, and so the market fell apart. So the government can rig these markets, and so that's why you have to view owning gold and silver as an insurance policy for the long haul, not necessarily as a short-term investment.
Well, largely in part there. But again, I'm going to keep on investing into it. But again, thank you so much for calling in. I think I have to let you go here. But thank you so much for calling in, receiving my emails, and responding to them. I do get a lot of response from other people. But again, I want to thank you again for coming on the show, taking your time. I'm going to email you and the URL and stuff, so maybe you can give it to other people if they want to hear you from here. And they can download the show easily.
I greatly enjoyed the show, and good luck with future episodes.
Yep. Thank you so much, and have a great night or afternoon wherever you're at.
Good night.
Yeah, good night. Bye-bye.